It was in 2018, less than a year after the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, that one of its most notorious participants, Robert Rundo, leader of the violent Rise Above movement, met his future co-host, Denis Kapustin, better known as Denis Nikitin. Isn't Denis Kapustin the one they call White Rex in Ukraine? Anyway.
Yes, White Rex is, that's who that
Denis
is.
Denis Kapustin? Okay, yeah. They named their podcast after Rundo's Active Club network, which has drawn inspiration from the neo-Nazis in Ukraine and proliferated NATO countries as the, quote, preeminent organization model for far-right street fighters. Thanks to his Jewish grandfather, Kapustin grew up in Germany. Today, he commands the Russian Volunteer Corps, perhaps the most heavily neo-Nazi military unit in Ukraine. Years ago, he inspired Robert Rundo, and not only as the godfather of white nationalist mixed martial arts tournaments in Europe, or the owner of a successful neo-Nazi brand, White Rex, which Rundo considered to be an exemplary active lifestyle movement. When they first met, Kapustin essentially played the role of unofficial ambassador at large for Ukraine's Azov movement. Rundo has said that these neo-Nazis and Kapustin in particular opened my eyes to the importance of sports culture in our movement. A couple months after the Russian invasion, he taunted the Southern Poverty Law Center, saying, quote, "We active clubs are like Azov, but the U.S. version." Quote, "This is my whole inspiration for everything," Rundo told a right-wing podcast in September 2017, referring to Azov as the future. "They really have the culture out there," he said. "They have their own clubs, they have their own bars, they have their own dress style. Going to Kiev in 2018 and being able to compete, honestly, that was one of the greatest memories of my life. It was an honor, and I'll always stand by those who stood by me. A lot of what has inspired me, our ideas, the structure, the vision, came from groups like Azov, Casa Pound, which is an Italian neo-fascist movement that is allied with Azov, and others." Okay, so we've talked about the Rise Above movement, which was mentioned earlier, and we've talked about Casa Pound, and we've talked about Azov in that article that I wrote about foreign fighters in Ukraine that we discussed on the podcast. Maybe I'll link that in the show notes too, so people can go listen to that if they haven't yet.
Yeah, they should.
So, I mean, this is something that people have been talking about, not just me. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security was concerned about neo-Nazis coming back from Ukraine after getting trained by Azov and then carrying out violence here in the United States. One of these groups where the members were all arrested were Rise Above movement members, because they were planning on starting riots and committing violence against people of color and whatever else here in the United States. Casa Pound, there's even, if you go read or go watch the episode that we did about foreign fighters in Ukraine, you'll see that there have been several arrests of members from Rise Above movement, from the French group called Zouaves, and from the Sons of Hagal in Italy, which were allied to, got training and weapons in Ukraine, and came back to their home countries and planned to do violence on. And probably the most extreme example of that was in Italy with the Sons of Hagal, who were planning on blowing up Jewish community centers and stuff like that. And they actually had quite a lot of weapons. And they actually shared members with the actively fighting Azov battalion at the time. Some of the Italian Sons of Hagal people had gone to Ukraine and were actually fighting currently in Azov at the time. So they didn't get arrested, but their co-conspirators back in Italy did.
It's really weird to think about, but I wonder how many of them I might have brushed past when the first time
you were in Rome.
Yeah, because that first night we didn't realize where we were staying, and the next morning it was like fascist graffiti like everywhere.
Yeah, I remember you.
It's like 10 years ago now.
I remember you telling me that you said to Nathan as you were like riding around in Rome, like that you were pilgrims in an unholy land.
That's right. But it was a little bit heartwarming because then the next day we woke up and it was all the fascist graffiti had been covered over or altered with red graffiti, and it was like I think I've said this before, but like the Italian for student block was Blocco Estudiante or something.
Yeah.
And then that was in black. It had like the fasces and like, or a swastika. And then the next it was covered over with red and altered to be like blocked intestine.
Oh,
like, yeah.
Okay, so last year, Active Club Finland adopted Azov's so-called idea of the nation symbol, which is bullshit. It's the Wolfsangel. If you look, I mean, you'll know what I'm talking about, the Azov symbol. It could possibly be an I and an N.
No, it couldn't.
But that's what they say it is. They say it's an idea of the nation symbol, and it's not the Wolfsangel, which, of course, in Ukrainian, they don't use the Latin letters for I or N. The closest letter to the I in Ukrainian looks like a backwards N, and the letter that sounds like an N in Ukrainian looks like an H. So, fuck you, you're lying,
and not even very, very well.
Yeah, it's just the Wolfsangel symbol, which is the symbol of the SS Das Reich division from the Waffen-SS, and of course it's used in all kinds of other Nazi iconography, a lot more than just that since the end of World War II. On top of the fact that they used the Sonorand, the black sun symbol. Let's see, which is from the floor of Himmler's castle in Wewelsburg. Okay, so this turn of events doesn't surprise me, referring to using the idea of the nation symbol. On the contrary, it was predictable, commented Alexei Rains, the most public-facing ideologist of the Azov movement. Thanks to its emotional power and aesthetic of appeal, the idea of the nation symbol will slowly but surely become the symbol of the international far-right solidarity. Other equally powerful symbols have followed the same path in the past. Yeah, like the swastika. Almost a dozen years ago, a newly created Azov battalion launched a podcast, Azov FN. Olena Semenyaka, the international secretary of the Azov movement, admitted in one of 2015 episode that Azov hoped to create its own right international. In the same interview, she said, "Our movement is growing, but is still too small to compare it to the real movement of the kind that Germany had between the wars, but we're moving towards this goal." Okay, so Olena Semenyaka is the public-facing ideological mouthpiece of the Azov movement. And she just said that their goal was to create a movement, the kind that they had in Germany in between the wars.
Yeah, just like a movement.
But according to liberals on the internet, and actually not just on the internet, in Congress, in the newspapers, those are not Nazis. They're just nationalist patriots. We are not resigning ourselves to the boundaries of thinking in terms of a single region. We defend not only the Ukrainian nation, national identity, but also the Slavic elements of the European element. And in the end, the white race. That was Semenyaka in 2015. And if you listen to our episode, we actually do a little bit more about the idea of the Azov movement's idea of Reconquista, which would kick out all the immigrants and gays and everything else out of Europe, in the same manner that the Spanish Christians kicked the Muslims and Jews out of Spain in the 16th century. Or the 15th and 16th century. That was what Reconquista is. Actually, the Reconquista was a lot longer than just all that. I know that it was a centuries-long reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula by the Spanish and the Portuguese during the Middle Ages, whatever. I know that. But the kicking out of the Jews came in the late 15th century. Anyway, moving on. The main topic of Semenyaka's interview was her Reconquista project, which hosted the Azov FM podcast on its website, whiteconquista.com. Alexei Kuzmenko investigated Reconquista, Azov's own white supremacist geopolitical initiative, and later revealed that Robert Rundo followed Semenyaka's project by the spring of 2015, well before he created the Rise Above movement. 3 years later, when Rundo and the other Rise Above movement members traveled to Ukraine, they met with Semenyaka and sparred with Azov's Reconquista Club in Kiev, where Denis Kapustin organized MMA fights. RAM showed interest in learning how to create youth forces in the way that Azov has, according to Semenyaka. Rundo got a tattoo of the White Rex logo, and by the end of 2018, the FBI raided his home. Denis was the first one to pick up the phone, Rundo recalled, who wanted to flee to Kiev. Kapustin was probably his associate in Ukraine who promised, "We'll take care of you. Just see to it that you get your white terror ass here."
Your white terror ass?
Yeah. I mean, he's probably meant terrorist, but there's a quote of a tweet, or the screen cap of a tweet here from the Rise Above movement that said, "Yesterday, nationalists in Ukraine held one of the biggest demos in a show of strength. There were an estimated 40,000 that marched. Some of the nationalists showed an awesome display of solidarity with the POWs of the RAM with a banner. Only through white unity will we win." That happened after the Rise Above movement's members were arrested under conspiracy to commit violence charges. Olena Semeniaka was still transparent about Azov's ambitions in those days. For instance, she told the U.S.-funded broadcaster RFERL, let's see, what is RFERL? That has a hyperlink. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Okay. She told Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty that it's possible for the far-right leaders to come to power now in Europe, and Azov wants a position in the front of this movement. Semeniaka has kept a low profile since 2022, but in 2024, she attended the launch of the Nation Europa network, which the Russian Volunteer Corps and Azov movement organized with Casa Pound and other like-minded groups. Weeks earlier, one of the top neo-Nazis in the Azov movement, Dmytro Kukurchuk, who now directs the ideological service of the Third Army Corps, declared that if a European reconquista begins, it will start with us. According to the journalist Leonid Rogozin, the Azovites who think globally, their ultimate goal is to stage a white race revolution in Europe that begins in Ukraine, spreads into Russia, where these two join forces and proceeds into the rest of Europe. So,
yeah, they're meeting up, but not quite in the way they think that they intended to.
Yeah. Well, the Third Army Corps is the most ideologically neo-Nazi of the two army corps that came out of the Azov battalion, which formed, I guess, 12 years ago. Now it is two army corps with tens of thousands of members each. We don't exactly know what their strength is like, but the Third Army Corps is the one that is less conciliatory towards the official politics of the Ukrainian state. The other one, I think, is the 12th Army Corps, and they're the ones that are more friendly with Zelensky and the sort of NGO industrial complex that keeps Ukraine afloat and keeps it taking orders from the Europeans and the United States. Whether or not it's because they've softened their Nazism or because they just see the necessity of continuing the flow of funding.
Yeah, right.
That's up for debate. But the Third Army Corps call the other Azovites the gay Azovites because they're the ones that are okay with the liberal NGOs that promote, gay pride parades and stuff like that in Kiev, which it's technically illegal to be gay in Ukraine, I think. Or no, it's not illegal to be gay, but gay marriage is illegal.
Yeah.
It's also illegal to adopt children. And there are some legal protections on the books, but they usually are ignored. They're not usually, but they're often ignored. And things like pride parades require heavy police security because they're often attacked. Anyway, Ukraine is an incredibly right-wing country. On the books, it's slightly less right-wing than Russia, but I believe the populace of Ukraine is probably more right-wing than Russians, or at least as right. Probably as right-wing, or if not more. I don't know.
I think more.
You think so? Well, certainly the Azovites are. It's just a different kind of right-wing, because in Russia, the right-wing in Russia is very devoutly Orthodox and, sort of sees the Russian state as a stand-in for the Tsar, the way that the Orthodox do. So they're almost like sort of the pseudo-monarchist types, right? Whereas the right-wing in Ukraine are like fascists, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But part of the official ideology of the Russian state is the integration of the many different ethnicities that populate the Russian state, which is why I'm not making excuses for the Russian state here. I don't think it's great, whatever. Which is why people like Denis Kapustin and Russian neo-Nazis go to Ukraine to fight against Russia because they want to balkanize Russia. They want to cut off all of the parts of Russia that have non-Russian majorities, and they want to deport all of the people in Russia that are not Russian back to all of those places, like the steppe peoples. There are many different populations of steppe peoples in eastern Russia, and of course, that's where their main ethnic locale is. But a lot of them are in St. Petersburg and Moscow, and in the West, because they're citizens of the country with equal protection of the law according to the Russian Constitution. And that is the big problem with Russia for the Russian neo-Nazis who go and fight in Ukraine against the Russian state, is because it's ethnically pluralist, legally and constitutionally, and they call Putin and people in Moscow Mongols that are controlled by the Jews.
I mean, Russia has 22 autonomous republics, like ethnic republics that have their own, constitution and legislature, and like it's very much not an ethno state.
No, not at all. There, of course, are, and this has always been a problem in Eastern Europe, violent ethno-nationalists within each population that attack minorities, but that's not the policy of the Russian state. Just like it's not in the United States, but it happens. The Russian Volunteer Corps, speaking of the devils, one of the elite units in Ukraine's military intelligence agency, is probably trying to lay the groundwork for a stage 2 of the White Reconquista. Over at Events in Ukraine, which I draw from heavily for our geopolitics episodes and is definitely linked in all of our geopolitics episodes, Peter Korotayev has written numerous articles about Azov and the RBC adjacent networks of neo-Nazi accelerationists that are getting teenagers into killing sprees in Russia. And a lot of those attacks on minorities, and not just minorities, just old people, mentally handicapped, stuff like that. The RBC and Ukrainian intelligence groups are like contacting teenagers in Russia to try to get them to do school shootings and attack minorities and stuff like that, to destabilize Russia. The latter tend to be fans of M8L8TH, also known as Hitler's Hammer, a Russo-Ukrainian National Socialist black metal band associated with the RBC, and before that, Azov. Korotayev writes, "No aspiring school shooter in Russia is without such an M8L8TH hoodie." In 2018, they released an album titled Reconquista. To be sure, North America has also seen the rise of what the FBI has been classifying as nihilist violent extremism. Rundo doesn't support the accelerationists, so he says, but he hasn't shunned them from joining his network either.
Man, I just looked up M8L8TH is like just search that, like an image search of that band. Like their merch is gross.
Yeah, and they're not even good.
Yeah, they don't look like they'd be good.
Let's see. I'm looking at their merch now. Yeah, we got some side profile of a very Aryan-looking man. Oh, upside down cross. Yeah, that's right. You forgot one of the things that hasn't been mentioned yet is Kapustin, I think, is a neo-Nazi. I think he's either Order of the Nine Angles or Nine Angles adjacent. So did I say he's a neo-Nazi? I meant he's a Satanist.
Yeah.
He's a neo-Nazi Satanist.